Hello everyone, and welcome to our webinar on realizing the return on threat intelligence services. Here's a snapshot of some of the statistics we have collected live from our own data on cybersecurity. I know some of these numbers are probably well known to you, but this is actual production data. So they're coming, these figures are coming out of our penetration testing, ethical hacking units, and some other offensive security applications. So it's pretty clear that computer systems these days are very vulnerable, and most of the installations could prove to be a significant liability to the companies. This means that hackers or people from the outside can exploit these vulnerabilities and then create some damage, whether it's reputational or actual financial impact, direct cost. 77% of our of the systems we test are servers, and they're usually exploited. They're really easy. Furthermore, some of the high-profile security leaders or IT directors, they think the companies are safe. The companies that they run and the infrastructure are safe, and there are no major security issues. But that's not the case. After some basic engagement in ethical hacking, we see that about 95% of these systems are actually really vulnerable. And the average time to fix these issues is even greater than 3 weeks, I think, with most companies going to more than 1 month and just a handful going to less than 1 week. So distribution is actually skewed a bit. This is a survey about what's the biggest cybersecurity worry our companies and the people that we talk to have, whether that's cybersecurity leaders, see profiles. Here's what the industry said. 2/3 of all the people that responded were really interested and really worried about information leaks and data loss or data leaks. You can already see that this risk understanding has shifted from the traditional risk vectors to some all things related to data-centric risks. So this means the industry is pretty much concerned about data loss, data leaks, and these types of events. This was very important for us because it has already validated what we knew about it, seeing the needs from the market, but also trying to anticipate the needs that not just our clients, but the whole industry is generating currently, 2021 as we speak. So how do we fight all these worries and how do we fight all these risks? Because hackers tend to use not just the dark web, but the internet itself. They share tips, they share techniques, methods to hack us, to compromise our data. That also, there's the dark web component that is specialized, and in some areas that there's quite a structured area. There are well-organized digital marketplaces where crime as a service is something that is really accustomed. So people just go there, exchange ideas, and they exchange compromised data, whether it's for regular currency or cryptocurrency, that doesn't really matter. So what matters is that my data and yours is traded back there, and we can actually see them talking about potential attacks, about potential targets, the methodology that they could employ, what tools and techniques they could use. And we actually understand each of the actors' profiles. So we see people just contributing with details there, people just consuming some details there, some people just bragging about hacks and compromised data, some people actually disclosing that data. So this is very interesting. Setting up profiles for the attackers is one very important thing. And we managed to use this as a weapon to fight against these types of threats. We call this group of risks digital risks. Why is that? It's because most things are related to the digital world, whether it's compromised identities, stolen credentials, stolen credit cards, um, fake goods. There's also a good chunk of the activity centered around phishing website detection, and whenever phishing attacks are launched or being prepared, knowing that in advance is really helpful. So we actually fight against these types of risks by trying to anticipate or at least learn about these events in the shortest time possible. This also means that we need to gather a lot of data, quite a lot of it, and analyze it. Most of the analysis being done automatically. So we have to rely on some levels of machine learning and trying to process tens of terabytes of data per day. That's really unstructured sometimes, and it's really hard to manage. The two types of uh, let's say approaches we have within using threat intelligence is using it either for operational use and integrating it with some types of activities that we already have in place in our companies. And then there's also that dynamic process that tries to remediate these types of attacks, even if some of them are really complex. So this means that we really need to integrate this process and cyber threat intelligence within the existing processes, whether that's risk assessment, whether that's cybersecurity monitoring or incident response, whether that's some other type of process we have in place in our company. We need to integrate threat intelligence in multiple forms within these processes to make them more effective. And of course, the end goal would be to lower incident response time and make it more efficient, more accurate, knowing beforehand what are the offensive IP addresses that generate phishing attacks, for example, or malware attacks, drive-by downloads. And then there's a subset of data that's mostly relevant to human analysts. So you really want your security teams to know the techniques that the attackers will use against you. This way you will be able to defend yourself and detect these attacks, even if you don't have any accurate IOC or indicator that would show the attackers coming towards you. So knowing this also with some attacker context and some deep integration with your tools, your cybersecurity ecosystem, this makes the cyber intelligence feed, really enrich the system. Of course, there's always the question about how far and how automated should we go? Should we use machine learning about this? Of course, we should. There's a balance that's probably different for every company. So there's a really hot topic about how exactly should we use this service. So there's a couple of instances of things that we can use it for. For example, we would use it for partner compliance monitoring. So whether we outsource some of the activity or we resell our products by using a third party, then we really need to make sure that our partners really comply with the rules we have set up in the commercial contracts between the parties. So this doesn't generally relate only to the legitimate parties that we are in business relationship with. This also relates to um, anyone else that claims to have a connection with your company, with your assets. So whether it's an unauthorized reseller that is just selling the products with your company logo, your brand, but they are not licensed to do so, they're not contractually allowed to do it, you can actually find out and discuss about it, see if there is some digital risk going on here. Then moving on, threat intelligence discovery is actually a more comprehensive part of the service. Just scanning this part, the unknown part of the less known part of the internet, such as the deep web that hosts more than 90% of the actual web content. Just looking at it could show some evidence of compromised assets that could be generated by an event in the near past or in the far past. Someone just selling a database that could belong to your company or that could have some data that belongs to your company or some assets that are under your custody, just like some debit and credit card data, maybe even some illegal services that could be offered. Just to give you a few examples, someone could be buying a denial of service attack against your company. They could plan this well in advance and they could be buying this openly in these kinds of dark markets. Then your artificial intelligence really helps to speed up this process to analyze and decrease reaction time, just sort through all this huge volume of data and just show you direct and actionable data. Then there's the question, how do we respond to these threats? So we find them and then we need to respond. This is very important because seeing which kind of risks are more relevant and which should be prioritizing which should be addressed first is really important. Just digging on in like hundreds of events at the same time, you really need to prioritize these risks. Sometimes you just need to issue some copyright notifications, take down issues to these media content companies or some even some digital service providers, internet service providers, and so on. Sometimes in the really worst case scenarios, you need to just start legal actions immediately. So you need to notify data protection authorities and some other public institutions that have this role in safeguarding the digital world. This is very useful when you also have this deadline that you need to obey. So finding these events as soon as possible and also acting promptly upon them, it's very important. We can be baited in many areas. Phishing and malware are just some basic examples, but financial fraud with electronic means is, I think, the oldest one we know. And as I said in the beginning, as you also saw from our industry survey, data leakage discovery, and of course, this digital brand compliance, these are parts of our activity that are really, really useful and they actually fit most of the needs the industry has right now. So hunting for these events is a full-time job for some of us and some of my colleagues and some other companies in the industry. So finding these signs of breaches, of data leaks, and of course notifying the affected party, this is very useful for the industry, for the cybersecurity industry itself. Of course, there are parts of our client base that actually benefit from other sides of the same service. These are, as I said, sales abuse discovery and some unauthorized brand usage. This is very useful to protect the reputation of most of our clients, not just the logo, but also the long-standing reputation they have. Luxury goods companies are a good example. Financial services and banks specifically, even better as a use case for them. And this is finding these unauthorized products or product use, these sales that are happening behind the scenes that are not really legitimate, and of course stopping that, trying to draw the picture on how cyber threat intelligence is actually useful in a number of areas. Is not just the traditional IOCs, dangerous IPs, and so on. It's moved well past that in the last 10 years. The main topic that our clients and prospects ask us about is, as I said in the beginning, and as our webinar is called, okay, so how is this efficient? What do I get in return? What's the ROI for this? Should I invest in this kind of service? What kind of return should I expect? How is this related to risk? These are some of the questions that you may already have, so I hope we can also answer some of these. Here are some use cases. Let's dive right into them because we've seen this a lot. We've had these questions a lot. Concrete use cases. So let's start with the traditional one. You would probably benefit a lot from getting this very accurate and very to the point information about cybersecurity indicators of compromise. This is really applicable to almost every company there is. And the use case is trying to get this data, push it into protection or detection mechanisms, get a more accurate and more sturdy defense against attacks, seeing attacks as they happen in real time and trying to anticipate even some of the attacks, and then, of course, get much better risk reduction than you would probably done otherwise. So it's not just those basic indicators, as I said, it's also tactics, procedures that the attackers take. You get to know this in advance and devise a method to block them. This is very useful to prevent active threats, and also going a bit far behind, um, trying to block attempts that may happen in the near future. So trying to anticipate also new procedures or new tactics that the attackers will take. So the typical deployment for this kind of use case is actually less than 6 weeks usually. So 4 to 6 weeks is what we see, pushing and integrating these types of feeds into existing mechanisms and achieving at least some level of automation that would ensure a better protection level for your company. So this is important. Um, this means that every other vendor that is already there is not excluded. They will still be there. They will be complemented by some types of additional information, and they will be actually better at what they already do. So your existing firewall vendor will still be there, but it will perform much better from the detection perspective. Then there's this challenge about how to integrate several technologies together. So this is a really a complex topic by itself, but just in a short sentence, it's the best use case when we can use all this technology and this threat intelligence feeds in conjunction with the existing process. So if you have a process to monitor things on the cybersecurity space, then just try to integrate as much as possible and to automate things and have more time to drill down into the accurate information that this new environment will produce. And this will help you on the long term to be more effective in cybersecurity monitoring and incident response. It's a generic use case, and I think it covers quite a lot of companies out there. The second one is a bit more tailored to not just financial institutions and FSI, but also some other types of institutions like retailers or connected industries. This is tailored to this is a device to try to prevent fraud incidents from happening by proactively finding these compromised, whether it's an actual bank credit card banking institution credit card, or is it just a prepaid card that is issued under a specific card issuer logo that is being used by, let's say, a large retailer or some other types of institutions. And this is quite straightforward. We just have a look at the credit card numbers, check for these breaches, try to determine whether it was an actual breach in our target company, or there were some breaches in other types of companies. These could be third parties that work for your company. This is also important when dealing with a large number of suppliers. So once one of your suppliers has a cybersecurity incident, they could also affect you as a company, as a stakeholder. Typical deployment for these types of setups is really fast. We've seen even less than 2 weeks, but the general setup time is 2 to 4 weeks, just to make sure most high-risk events are covered and get some accuracy in day one from this process. We can actually see actionable results in less than 2 weeks. This is important. This is because once we've started working, we already can generate accurate events that we need to triage together, and it just helps with ROI significantly. This also means that once you set up this kind of service, you can actually go out there and respond to these types of events. Let me give you just a few examples. You can decide to revoke the compromised credit cards, or you can just notify the partners that have probably been breached, or there was some incident on their side. You can actually engage the authorities really fast. So this happens really straightforward. This is one type of service that could further be extended to some additional use cases. Think about the hospitality industry and the loyalty cards. This is just one example. So this helps prevent fraud, and it's really easy to compute in the ROI. It's basically the cost of risk that is really significantly reduced, and also from actual financial numbers, you can actually see it in action. Um, by the end of each quarter, you can get to see the reduction in unauthorized sales and hopefully an increase in authorized sales that you have marked up, and also the number of incidents that you have avoided. So clients that will be really pleased with the user experience that they get. So being contacted and talked about how a potential fraud could be avoided by simple action like revoking their credit cards or just locking it down for some cooldown period. Incident response for this kind of use case is really well tailored for each specific case. So depending on the risk appetite of your institution, this kind of use case could have potentially hundreds of outcomes, depending on the granular type of event that's happening. So compromised data could also be used for legal purposes or trying to defend your company's reputation and in a legal proceeding. Just proving this process being in place would help a lot on proving that you are proactively engaged in reducing this risk. The third use case, and one of the well-known, let's say, risk that happens, we see it almost on a monthly basis. Using these um, brand fraud and reputational risk information, or using threat intelligence actually to lower this kind of risk. The methods that the attackers used, so these fraudulent ways of working, just shows some new attack vectors. At some point, you actually deduct a specific method from analyzing the actual events. So you get to see some brand fraud and then see how it's deployed by the attackers. This is important just to allow a specific set of new methods to reduce risk. Of course, the individual method to reduce that specific risk, but also closing some other gaps in your control environment. Let's think about a typical retail business that they would be exposed to a huge cyber risk, especially the ones having a more online presence, but not specifically just those. A cyber breach could generate millions, if not tens of millions, of direct impact, but also the long term. They will be affected on an annual basis and lose a lot of revenue. This means that they are really willing to collect information, so getting all this information about the threats and using this huge pool of data that we gather, um, whether it's forums, public forums, or invitational ones, any types of websites, social media activity. Then there's also some IRC activity still going on in the late 2020s. So this will be relevant moving forward because attackers don't just obsolete their methods of communication. So public forums are still a thing in 2021, as are IRC channels and some other newer methods of communication. So having access to all this kind of relevant and quantifiable intelligence eventually reduces your risk exposure. This is important. Again, typical deployments is really fast. It's very similar to what we did with IOCs, very similar to what we did with credit card numbers and the other use cases. Effectiveness, like almost full effectiveness, is reached in less than a month and a half. So the first cases are actually seen to be identified in less than 5 days. So that's really fast once you set up this type of process. One clever thing about it is that you can actually see the usefulness of automation in the incident response process. So this is one of the use cases that is really best suited for automation and orchestrated response. Orchestrated incident response means that we can eliminate pretty much 90% or more of the time spent for handling this kind of event. This also means that it enables you to work faster with third parties, whether it's your preferred card processor or a card transaction processor or card issuer, maybe your host bank, or maybe even better, maybe the authorities. Maybe locally you are allowed, sorry, you are required to have a swift interaction with the authorities. Then you can set up a process where you could streamline all this. This is what we see currently. The industry is pushing us as a service provider to go faster and more accurate. This means more AI, a bit of machine learning where applicable, and also a lot of orchestration. So in the end, of course, we already have experienced analysts behind it, making sure that this process is really well defined and optimized, going close to CMMI 5 level. So here are some value pillars. Let's talk about some figures, because this is something that we have been asked quite a few times before. We get this question from C-level executives, the finance executives. Okay, what's the ROI? How do we compute this? So I covered a few lines before about this. There are a few ways to quantify how effective threat intelligence services are. Sometimes it's just very useful to implement this kind of service to reduce the time needed for incident response, to reduce the need for manual analysis. That cuts the daily work of a security analyst by quite a lot. We see it from 20% to 60% on average, but it could be even more. In highly orchestrated environments, we also see rare cases of more than 90% reduction. So that's where we are actually targeting to get most of our clients. So it's clear we save a lot of money by not employing a huge team of security analysts that would dig into this kind of data all day. Of course, we would still need a human component. It will be much lighter and much more effective at what it does. And we'll also have more time to make this process more efficient and just feed this machine learning algorithms with better feedback and supervised learning. And then from the automation perspective, the human layer, the human analyst will actually improve the types and the flows that we would choose to automate. So this is easily quantifiable. Going further, the tactical use, and I've really been in quite a few discussions with cybersecurity leaders about this, is whether to implement new feeds of new types of sub-processes from threat intelligence within existing feeds, existing processes. So this means that we need to think about it, how we could tactically place and use this service and where. We've seen that we can use it in like 10 or 20 areas within our companies, but does it make sense to use them everywhere? Will it make some processes more difficult? Will they be useful in some processes? Maybe not. So just deciding on where to use it and how, just avoiding to overdo it. This could be a decision on its own. Then moving a bit higher up the stack, there's also the strategic question. So talking to cybersecurity companies, CEOs, but also CEOs of companies that use cybersecurity services, we saw that there was some gap at the top between the C-level executives of service providers and C-level executives, especially CEOs from our client companies. The executive layer had a really strong, a really good understanding of cyber risk exposure, but they actually asked the operational and line managers to handle this risk. This second tier of management actually helped by doing some operational activities around the risk management, which was probably not enough. while CEOs actually thought of more strategic use of threat intelligence. So what that meant was that there was still some gap between what was needed and what was actually going on. How we filled this gap was to help uh, mediate and have strategic alignment from the risk management perspective. So as the executive management saw this cyber risk gap, we came in and helped intermediate this discussion between the parties. This helped implement new processes within the companies that were not operational in nature. They were uh, kind of high-level risk mitigation processes that were brought in between the high-level overview of executive management and what the operational management layer has implemented. Let's think about the ROI for a moment, because this was one of the main stems of this webinar. Uh, from our own figures and our estimates, but also from the industry averages, we see a payback of about 3 months for the entire service fee for threat intelligence. This means that on the long term, you could achieve at least a 2x ROI on every type of investment, even for the most, let's say, exotic use case. This is directly quantifiable. How we computed this figure is really easy. We had, let me give an example from the retail sector. This is something that we do almost every month now, this kind of calculation. So we've identified, let's say, that the main risk is to have unauthorized sales of some specific luxury goods products. That's pretty clear. We've also identified what the methods were, where the actual uh, event was going on. So if it was a physical meetup between the let's say the perpetrators and their potential clients, or if it was a fully digital experience, um, this meant that someone was illegally selling some luxury goods. We found out about this. The total estimated damages were close to 8 or 9 times the value of the threat intelligence services that was helped to that was used to find this kind of event. So of course the ROI will not be 9x. It will probably be much less than that, since you cannot cut this process entirely. They will just go somewhere else and sell these goods. But the main effect was that despite a down market in luxury goods selling in 2021 at least, but most part of 2020, this company still achieved an increase of sales, and this was balancing those losses that were coming from the unauthorized use. So in the end, the average figures are between 200% and 380 to 400% ROI for, let's say, for this retail sector. Each sector could have different values, but we would need to talk about this in more detail. Let's talk about other types of ROI, which are not necessarily easy to quantify in financial terms. Let's have this risk adjustment on budgets savings. So having this feed of information inside your existing technology, making it more efficient, more accurate. This actually leads to less spending in cybersecurity. It will not cut it entirely. You would still need to invest a lot in cybersecurity, but having more accurate, more efficient tools and processes, we see this between 10 and 20% reduction in total spending, which in some companies could be a significant amount. So it's a percentage. It's not an actual figure because it could vary a lot again, but this just to give you an idea, try to compute 10% in the worst case scenario from what you've spent on cybersecurity, and that's your reduction. And just to cut this subject, because it's a really important topic, I know, for all of you. Um, some of our clients and actually ourselves, we look at how much do we expect to cut incident rates per year. So let's say we have about 8,000 events per year. Should we model, let's say a 15% reduction, then we would definitely generate a return on our investment. How big is it? You could compute that for yourself. So these are just some examples of applied ROIs coming from practice and coming from us talking directly to cybersecurity leaders or C-level executives. And we actually help everyone with this data and provide all the substance behind our calculation. Of course, we have several models for each industry, but this is a different topic. There are different services around cybersecurity, whether it's ethical hacking or penetration testing, OT security within our specialized team. Threat intelligence, as I've already mentioned today, is a strong offering that we are actually very proud of. DevSecOps and application security, CI/CD security enhancements. Then there's the managed security operations and SOCs across the globe. And of course, GRC and advisory services around governance, risk, and compliance. These help a lot of our clients. So um, threat intelligence, as I said, is a key aspect and it can help with a lot of use cases. We do this across the globe. It varies a lot from region to region, from country to country, but ROI calculation is done pretty much in the same way across the world. So this being said, and I really hope you enjoyed some of our thoughts that we shared today. Thank you very much once again for attending, and I hope you find at least a few of these considerations useful when computing the ROI for cyber spending, but also specifically for threat intelligence services consumption. This is the main topic of the webinar today. Have a great day forward, and I'll be looking forward to the next webinar on threat intelligence or cybersecurity.